What's up, Dunwoody? Welcome back to the podcast all about Dunwoody, Georgia. My name is Matt Weber. Show is brought to you by Dr. Brett Friedman with Village Orthodontics and Discover Dunwoody. Podcast is all about Dunwoody, and my favorite part about the podcast is when I'm able to better my life by getting other people's bending your ear and telling me how I can get my son into college and the best ways and the timing and all of these different things. So Brian Eufinger is here today, and he's been on the podcast before. You've got this, it's in Sandy Springs, right?
Edison Prep, right on the Sandy Springs Dunwoody line, yeah.
Okay, so this guy is the man around here for test prep, and so all of the parents, listen up. I don't even know which questions to ask you, so I'm just going to let you go right now, and I'll ask my dumb questions later. How about that? And if you talk over my head, you're talking over everybody's head, so I'm going to slow you down. Okay?
You bet. Yeah. So, I mean, basically, so my wife and I, we run Edison Prep. It's a tutoring company in Sandy Springs that has worked with about to be the 25,000th student, been around for 15 years. So feel very old. We have students who are married, have babies, other things. We run into people in Kroger. So I feel very old these days.
Yeah.
We love our job. So I was telling you earlier before we started how we approach everything we do teaching wise from a place of gratitude, just because both my wife and I paid for all of college, room, board, tuition, everything via these tests. And I quit JV tennis, not varsity, but JV tennis, because I needed to make time. I had 5 APs plus band plus tennis. Junior year, not to give kids who are listening to this podcast an excuse, but it's true. Junior year is a cruel joke because you have more APs than ever, maybe a boyfriend, girlfriend, more varsity sports than ever, toss in SAT, ACT. Junior year is very busy. So it's hard. So kids complain, but that's life. Life gets harder. But if students work really hard on their GPA, taking hard classes and tests, you can not just get into better schools, but also cut the cost of college. Like in the case of a family that has 3 or 4 kids, it's a retirement date altering type math if you play your cards right and if you do a little research ahead of time to realize what the rules of the road are, because they're so different than when you and I were in high school. Like C's were a thing when you and I were in high school. They were a super common thing. I have plenty of friends who had 71 averages, 75 averages, and things are, if a parent is really busy at their corporate job and has not updated their mental mindset of understanding like what GPAs mean today and how the rules work today, not to say nothing of all the costs and how the costs have changed since you and I were in college. They would do themselves well to, the earlier you get that information, you can turn that Titanic around and not have any oopses that you have to wait till your second kid to learn on.
Well, I feel like I was kind of oblivious in college or in high school, at least. I got through with the 3.0, and I was telling you before, it was team sports and weight training. We're upping that average. And so now I own this restaurant where these kids come in and talk about like what they're planning for college, and it seems impossible. I mean, these kids are taking gifted classes, getting a 4.0. They're graduating school with a 4.0 and not getting into Georgia. That's just mind blowing to me, but they're not taking the right classes. And so that's when somebody like you comes in. And I wish that it was almost a class in high school that taught you, where you should be doing, what direction you need to be going in.
For sure. I do like one change that's been happening these past 15 years, and that is when I was in high school, at least at my high school and a lot of other high schools when you and I were in high school, they would be very paternalistic and political, like who got the honors or AP classes. It was based on if the teacher liked you or not and that stuff. A lot of schools have gone to a more permissive, like, okay, it's your funeral. If you want to try it, we admire the hustle. If you want to try really hard, but if you do get a C-, we're going to make you go down at semester to regular, not honors or whatever, which I like that. Because if a kid wants to work hard, like don't tell them, no, you're not good enough. And so I do like administratively, it's not all schools, but most schools have taken more of that philosophy. And that's why you're seeing these kids, like the average kid at UGA by graduation, not by the time they apply, but by graduation has around 9 AP classes or dual enrollment or IB classes. Now, that sounds crazy, but your school, Dunwoody, has the block schedule, which makes things easier than ever to take really creative number of APs and dual enrollment, other stuff. So you guys have advantages that other schools don't always have. So that's a nice feather in Dunwoody's cap. Okay. But when you're signing up for classes, it's not about taking the most. It's you want to keep it classy. If you're at a school where the average person is taking this many APs, as long as you can handle it, like my favorite line from one of the assistant director of admissions, the number 2 guy, I was on a panel with him at North Point Mall at a college fair, and you could have heard a pin drop because, of course, parents are very attached to their travel sports.
Yes.
And so he leaned up into the microphone when some parents said, well, how do we balance it? Because my kid has so many sports and extracurriculars. And the guy had no drama. He just leaned right to the microphone and goes, ma'am, extracurriculars are just that, extra. And so you could, and the whole, like, awkward, but it's so true. Like, once your foundation, once that entree on your plate of good grades, taking hard classes, good test scores is there, yes, you don't want to be the person with a goose egg who did 0 activities ever, but there's a balancing act there. So, and we've tutored some people who are freakishly smart from Dunwoody High School who can somehow handle 5 APs plus 3 sports plus that job at Chick-fil-A next to Dick's Sporting Goods. Like, they can handle it all somehow. But you parents got to help their kids understand. They know their kids just as well as the kid knows themselves. The parents have to help them understand their limits so they're not jeopardizing and getting 5 Cs and stuff.
Yeah. Tell your Firehouse story, the kid from Firehouse. I really enjoyed that. I was listening to another podcast you put out earlier. And
So there's a kid who worked at Firehouse Subs right next to our office here in Sandy Springs. His dad works in our office complex. And his dad makes an okay amount of money, but not the kind of person who can stroke a 5 or 6 figure check just randomly for your full price out of state type school. And he's a friend because he's been in the office. We've been in the office complex together for a long time. And so I could be a little more blunt with him than I might a random person calling me on the phone.
Yeah, be blunt with us.
Yeah, but he goes, his son was mortgaging him and his future in his dad's pocketbook by making subs for $9 an hour. So I said, no offense, like, your kid is a 28.25, which is because irony is 1 question below the bare minimum amount of money for Auburn. Yeah. And so if you go from 28.25, because 28.5 rounds up, but if you go from 28.25 on the ACT to a 32.5, rounds up to a 33, the numbers change each year as they shuffle around the aid. But at the time, it was worth $17,000 a year. So times 4. So $68,000. So fixing about 22 questions was worth $68,000, like more than a mortgage payment per question. So I said, I worked at Kohl's for $5.55 an hour back in high school. Like, I admire hard work. I was the pallet jack guy in the back of Kohl's. But I said, no offense, like, if he doesn't quit Firehouse, you're not serious about Auburn or about these schools you're looking at. You got to have him quit. Go back. And so the dad quit on behalf of his son. He didn't tell his son, go quit. He once his dad verified, he checked up on my data to make sure I was telling the truth. And he looked at it, and the data is right there on Auburn's website. It's very crystal clear. He's like, wow, yeah, why are you doing this for $9? He was not earning $9 an hour. He was earning negative $300 an hour, relatively speaking. And Auburn is not even very generous compared to Alabama. Forget it. You get a 30 single day, $112,000, no questions asked. Like, there's far more amazing schools in terms of merit aid than that, which actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. So, as I mentioned earlier, but both my wife and I paid for all of college room board tuition via these tests. So our passion project, it's time to give back. I always joke, I have gray hair in my beard. It's time to start giving back. And I paid a summer intern this summer to scrape data off the internet nationwide and built a website. I got to be on WSB with Mark Aram and do all kinds of cool interviews. It went viral. It got picked up by Yahoo Finance. It's a website called meritaidgrids.com. So meritaidgrids, plural.com. And there's 190 schools and growing on that list, where a lot of these schools now have these XY grids, just a table, like a graph paper that says, here is my GPA, here's my test score, and if you get this score, this GPA, we promise you Kohl's Cash, this much money. And so when you and I were in high school, Emory, I applied to Emory. They did give me some okay money, but they would not publish data. They said, just apply. You never know. And so schools were not transparent 15, 20 years ago. Now they are. And I love it. I'm glad that the schools are being transparent now. And so obviously Harvard does not have a merit aid grid, but they're Harvard, but plenty of flagship schools have it. Michigan State, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, growing every year. And so we're going to keep making that a public resource. And what's so neat, I had no clue whether it was going to be successful or not, but I want to spend some money. It's a one-time cost. I'll maintain it. It's a free resource to everybody. So you go on there, you click on it. And one thing I want to do, some parents get this vibe because, of course, the loudest people in the volleyball stands at the sports matches are the ones bragging about their kids and the crazy scores. It's important that parents hearing this know there's different levels of merit at every place in the world. So at Mizzou, my sisters went to Mizzou, both of them, and Mizzou is very generous, where with as low as a top 37% score, so 2 out of every 5 people taking the test get that score, you can get up to $34,000, no questions asked, from Mizzou. At the higher levels, you can get $84,000 for as little as a top 12% score. So to put it in perspective, a score that would definitely get you rejected probably from Georgia could get you up to $84,000 from Mizzou. So if that's one of the schools in your list, then it certainly takes the sting off if you're someone who couldn't quite pull off Georgia, et cetera. And of course, we're just so lucky in general. There's merit aid grids, but why am I here? I grew up in Missouri. Missouri, if you were valedictorian and had a perfect score, they would give you a thumbs up and a slap on the back, and that's it. Like we are kids, parents get it. Kids don't get how rare what we have here, the lottery scholarship and the Hope Scholarship and the Zell Miller Scholarship is compared to other states. Like we have it, and then Florida, right south of us, has the Bright Future Scholarship, same thing. But most schools, most states do not have this. So if a parent plans really early, they can really cut the cost of college, and it's so important. It's literally retirement date altering. And the other thing is, parents who have older kids don't realize, good news, there's a statute legally based on the Gold Dome, based on how the Hope Scholarship works. They shift up and down based on what percent of people score what each year. Mm-hmm. So normally it used to be a 26 on a single day to get the Zell Miller 100% full tuition. And it's dipped, at least for this year. It might go back up next year, who knows? But it's dipped to a 25 instead of a 26. So the number of people who qualify for the 25 is a lot. A lot of our students are caught right there in that line. And it's important to know on a single day. So whereas if you apply to Georgia and you send in your scores, they will only use the English and math scores. But they'll also let you use your English score from September and your math score from October. Whereas if you want money from Mr. Kemp, single day, 25. So some parents find that out after the fact because they qualified mixing and matching, but not on a single day, and cost themselves thousands of dollars. So reading the fine print is important on that, all the Georgia Futures website, Georgia 411, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and something else you mentioned, the net price calculator. Is that pretty common, like for different schools?
Yeah. I will say, just like anything, picture how bad like grammar check, like spell check and stuff was back when you and I were in high school compared to Grammarly today. I'll use that analogy and say most of the net price calculators, they were trying the best they could, but they were pretty potato. They were not great 10 years ago. I would say I'm very pleasantly surprised with how accurate. I mean, they're never perfect, but enough that it wouldn't change the decision. Like if it's off by $1,100, that probably is not per year times 4. That's not going to probably change your decision. We used to see 5-figure errors in the NPC, and parents were like, "What the heck?" So just net price calculators. If a parent listening wants to find out, not all schools, but most schools have a thing where you just type in, Purdue University NPC, and you enter some high level data from the first page of your tax forms, and it gives you a pretty decent estimate.
Yeah. I mean, if your teenage son or daughter comes to you and says, "This is the school I want to go to," you're excited about that, but you have to have some sort of idea how much you're going to be paying at that school, and that you don't want to ask your kid that. You want to do your research on the back end and figure it out on your own.
Well, and that's why you want to find out the good news, bad news early. So, for example, on the Merit Aid Grid's website, what if someone finds out, oh, wow, this one school gives out aid? Go put in your stats, net price calculator, and also your academic stats. Go look, what if even with your family's income and the highest level of the Merit Aid Grid that they give out, there would still be a giant gap, you couldn't bridge that gap? Then that's actually helpful, because then you can not include that on your list and give your kid false hope. So smart planning up front is so important.
Yeah. I mean, it's a traumatic thing for kids. The kids that work for me, or teens that work for me, one of them was crying in the bathroom the other day because this is the time every year where they figure out, who's getting in or who gets accepted early. And it's a lot. And so you got to be there for your kid. And these are easy ways to do that. So thanks for all these tips.
Yeah.
So you do all test prep, or you do some tutoring now too, right? Didn't I read that somewhere?
Yeah. So we do both. So it used to be 99% of our business was SAT, ACT. Now it's like 85%. So just in the last year, there's a lot of COVID learning loss. We're still working through some kids who missed out on some really important foundations of middle school math, and it shows. Most levels of math, bio, chem, physics, some English, et cetera. We do. Subject tutoring has gone from under 1% to 15% of our tutoring. Because like I was saying before we started recording, if I help someone get a perfect score on the SAT, only to have them have 10
they have
C,
a C average.
It was all nothing. And even if we can't help, I don't speak French, but I've been around for forever. I know people. I can refer you to a French tutor. So it takes a village. And whether it be someone who has they need a CPA recommendation, weird family financial situation, especially you're a business owner. Business owners are run through the ringer, but they're treated like they're all billionaires when that's not the case. But if people need college counselor recommendations, French tutor recommendations, even if we can't help, we're happy to help on that front. But our bread and butter is is SAT, ACT. We actually tutored over 6% of the ACT test takers in Georgia last year, which is
that's cool.
Which is crazy. But we go into a lot of high schools that will cancel school for a day and have us come teach the junior class, like in Columbus or Americus, Georgia, and some other. We do our normal group classes and one-on-one tutoring at our office in Sandy Springs, but we are popular. I am. My wife jokes that it's my Catholic guilt, which is probably partially true, that I don't believe that you necessarily have to run up the tab and make things cost a lot of money. For most kids, like the most recent kid I signed up yesterday actually is from Dunwoody High School, and the mom, her older kid did not get into the schools they really wanted to, and it took a pivot and a left turn, so they're trying to learn on kid number 2. And the mom was panicking. Before even calling me, she bought the largest package on our site. I have no clue who this lady even is. I just see the transaction come through. I called her. I'm like, hi, who are you? And so the kid had like a 23, 23, 24, 24 on the ACT and some pretty reasonable goals. I said, let's back it up a step. Let's do the class first, build the foundation inexpensively with the good structure, and then do a much smaller amount of private fine tuning. There's no need. Now, if a person has 17 on English and 35 on math, that person should probably just do targeted grammar. But most people are human. They get the easy stuff right and the hard stuff wrong. And so obviously we make more money recommending that people do pure private tutoring. But I don't believe it's necessary. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. 91% of people we work with either only or start off with the class just because every kid, the national average kid in suburbia takes the test 3 times. 1 time, insanely rare. 7 times, really rare. But 2, 3, 4 times, super normal, especially when there's even the kid who tells me, Brian, I swear, if I get a 30, I'm done. Oftentimes they get a 30, they look at the merit aid grid. They look at the merit aid grid and they feel this guilt because when they look at that, they deep down know I didn't do most of the homework. And if I can just get 10 more questions, I can save mom and dad like a Tesla. Literally. And so these kids, it's so funny watching the kids who swear they'll be done not be done, because why not get greedy? So I am a fan of let's run up the scoreboard. So the worst they can do if you do too well is throw extra money at you and save your parents money.
Do you always deal with the parents and the kid? Is there anything where you try to keep it just to the kid and say, hey, tell your parents this, or is it lots of communication with the parents?
It's both. A lot of times parents have to sign off on the schedule because sometimes kids will design a unicorn plan that's not approved by parents. But it's both. But mostly with the kid, it's about the homework and the strategy and the homework plan and how we're going to get there. Whereas the parent is mostly logistics and football reschedules and other things like that. But it's teamwork. But I will say the students who, if anybody who's listening wants to have faith in America, go on the Reddit and go on the Reddit ACT and SAT pages. Those kids there, because there's a false narrative that, these tests measure wealth. I'll be honest, if Arthur Blank were my dad, I dare you to try to get me to care about the SAT and ACT. My dad's Arthur Blank. Why do I care? Right? So the people on these Reddit pages that work hard, I self-studied for what I always call $1.50 in $1.50 in Goodwill Hunting library fines. So that famous quote. So I did. My dad printed off a bunch of tests at his job, PDFs, and I worked and studied. And it's not easy, but it's not hard. It's commas, it's rectangles, it's putting in the reps, but it's very approachable. It's not an IQ test. It's mundane stuff. It wouldn't be practicable. So there's this black box mysteriousness to it that some kids give the SAT, ACT. It's commas and rectangles. And again, you can take it as many times as you want to, so there's no stress. And so always tell people that the biggest thing I'm struggling with right now is, here we are, we're recording this in February 2025. 2/3, if not 3/4 of the phone calls I'm getting right now are current sophomores who are planning for next year. And so the current junior parents who talk to their parents in the baseball stands feel behind and worried. And so it's important. If I were the high school principal, I would make everyone take a full-length mock ACT before the end of sophomore year. Not because they're going to start studying. If you're the Dunwoody High School quarterback, let's wait till second semester when the season's over. But if everyone can at least have their sophomore PSAT and a mock ACT, and before they scatter to Camp Thunderbird and Camp High Harbor and stuff, know which test they're better at, the amount of household stress that would be avoided. So if all parents of sophomores listening to this is we offer free mocks at our office, in person and virtual, every weekend. Just get one done, just so because everyone, best of intentions, I'm going to take the mock, but then life happens, AP exams, finals, Camp High Harbor, football camp, oops, I'm a senior. And all of a sudden, time flies. So, if sophomore year's over, and junior year is not, it's a great time to be taking the test. And so any plan I design, I'm easy breezy. Any plan you want is fine, as long as I can try and have you done by the June test at the absolute latest. Because you mentioned this earlier, early action versus regular decision. 10 years ago, early action meant early action, and regular decision was quite regular. Now, regular decision should be renamed irregular decision at a lot of schools, because let's talk Davidson. Davidson admits up to 86% of their entire class via early. Georgia, about 60%. Most schools, about 60%. And if you, by the time you take out the 60% plus the set asides for Carson Beck and Todd Gurley and whoever else, like, how many spots are left for Sarah from Alpharetta? Not too many. So if your kid can get their essays and all their other stuff in order, you don't miss housing deadlines, merit deadlines, because regular decision, well, yeah, but Auburn has an earlier deadline if you want merit money. And so there's all these deadlines. So you will thank yourself later if you can get your academic stuff and your essays written to be able to apply for the early action round, because it really is regular decision these days.
Discover Dunwoody is dedicated to enhancing the visitor experience in our city. They actively seek feedback from visitors to improve services and ensure that they have a memorable stay here. From providing comprehensive guides on local attractions to making accommodations easy to find. So if you know somebody looking to stay in Dunwoody, remind them to check out discoverdunwoody.com/What's Up Dunwoody for hotel options. By booking through that link, you'll be supporting this show and helping to promote our local businesses. So, let's make sure that every visitor leaves with unforgettable memories of our beautiful city. Yeah, and just knowing like what you're about to take is so important. I remember I got to do the Duke thing. I forgot exactly what it was called in 7th grade, and it was cool. I'm sure I did horribly on it, but it was an idea of what I'm going to be learning for junior, senior year. I guess junior year is taking tests. I've got all kinds of questions here, and I know we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but so my son is in private school. And we're kind of weighing whether, one, if we can afford to do a private high school. He's in 7th grade. And we've heard that going back to Dunwoody High School, like more kids get into schools, or as many kids get into schools from public schools than private schools. Is there any truth to any of that?
So all schools are going to say we don't have any quotas, we don't have any preference, etc. But it's a matter of context. And I'm not even against the context. So let me give you an example. I tutor some pro bono boot camps in South Georgia. There are many counties below the Nat line in Georgia where not a single person scores a 31 in the entire year.
Yeah.
And so if you're the valedictorian and have a 26 on the ACT in Claxton, Georgia, would I bet my dog's life that person's getting in it? Because we're the University of Georgia, all 159 counties, not the University of Alpharetta. And so so there's context to it. So you have to know your kid's limit. If your kid cannot handle, say, if you go graduate last in your class from Westminster, are you getting to Georgia? No. Could someone who's last in their class at Westminster possibly go to another school I won't slander here on a public podcast and be top 10%? Of course they could. Like, Westminster is literally the smartest school in the entire southeastern seaboard. Like, their stats are not. 3/4 of the class has a top 0.8% ACT score.
Really? That's cool.
Literally. So you as parents have to know the context of your kid. Plus also, parents always ask us, so where did you send your kids? Like, our kids are slated to eventually go to Riverwood, but Riverwood and Dunwoody were two of the top ones we were looking at as we were starting our family and buying our house, etc. Because Dunwoody has a good blend, so does Riverwood, of people from all walks of life, rich, poor, in the middle, politically and religiously. It's a good blend. So I think it's not just about the getting in, it's also about knowing what kind of environment you want for your kid, but also the competition level. Because I want my kids to smile. I don't want them being stressed. So send them to a school where you think they're going to be having fun and also be able to, yes, be competitive and be closer to the top of the class. And so only parents can understand what that might look like, because there's way different levels of competition, because it's not personal. For example, if they did not put a cap, like statistically based on just the numbers and test scores and other stuff, should they accept 180 kids out of the 200 from Westminster? Probably. But is it probably just going to be 60 or 80? Probably. And so that is where, when you hear these rumors pop up, there's no hard quota. There's no, they're actually, most schools are flying through applications so fast that this romantic notion of a tweed bag, they're not taking a tweed bag down to Crema and reading applications for 20 minutes each. They are running a mile a minute barely through the applications. So
it's probably AI doing half of it too.
Well, and that's actually, I'm glad you said that. So you you have a podcast. So imagine saying this into a hot microphone. I do not know if this person still has their job. The person from the University of North Carolina actually admitted, media relations person, that they have a contract with Grammarly or somebody else to run all their essays through AI and give it a score. So after all these people spent so much time and sometimes money doing that, I mean, they said, oh no, we still had a person do a final check on it, but like they're drowning in applications. Like they have this many emissions, and that's an important note. So as much as it's romantic to think you can save money by going through all the steps, I hired a college counselor. First of all, hiring a college counselor is actually a very important thing. So this is a terrible analogy, and I'll get in trouble for using it, but it's an accurate one. I hire a guy who mows my lawn. I will never mow my lawn again. You know why? I would do a worse job of it. I would hate every minute of it. It would just it's terrible on so many levels. So in the big picture cost of college, like second only to your house.
Yeah, it's a big expense.
It's a big cost. So many parents like cheaping out on just even a little. You can do a la carte college counseling. Like we refer out 99.9% of our college counseling because you don't know what you don't know. The rules change so fast every year. Even though I'm adjacent and I live and breathe every day. Oh wow, that's a new policy at that school. It's a good thing. It's a good thing I keep in touch with these people so I can communicate that to our SAT students because the rules just keep changing. And so, and every year, like the SAT went digital last March. And the ACT is changing this September to make the science optional. So some schools, Carnegie Mellon, still want science. Georgia Tech, which is very similar to Carnegie Mellon, says, no, we're not using science. Like the rules of the game, it's sort of like the NFL. How can you stop messing with the kickoff rules? Like it's like every year.
You worked hard to get to know this, and now they're switching it up.
Exactly.
You had mentioned that there's, different tests, ACT, SAT, and if you're better at one of them, you should kind of go all in on that one. Is that correct? Do all schools take both of those scores?
Correct. Since 2001, every school in America has accepted both evenly, Visa, MasterCard, and most of them use software, not unlike Salesforce. It's a version of Salesforce, but it's for college stuff that vacuums up your highest scores. We had a Dunwoody mom a couple years ago, actually. She's not from this country originally. She didn't know. She thought it was just the rules. She sent her kids 1,100 SAT and 35 ACT, and the kid was basically locked in their room crying beside themselves, and I had to walk the mom off the cliff and say, it's fine, because literally they use this software called Slate. It's very unlikely they're even going to see it, and even if they did see it, they're not mean people. It's in their they want to put you in the best light they can, and so the kid by now is graduated from tech, and he's fine. So, but there's no need. We say, printed in big letters in our book, it's better to be varsity in one sport than JV in two. And like I said earlier, kids are so busy junior year that we can't afford to be amazing at both tests. So that's why we say take mocks, or you can use the PSAT that everybody takes in October and compare it to a mock ACT, and then just ride the stronger horse. About 45% of kids are better at one and 45% better at the other. Only about 10% are equal. And if those 10% are equal, then I want a happy kid who's engaged and does homework. So if you are truly tied, then maybe it does come down to, there's not a conflict. Now that's the thing. The test is only offered 7 times a year. Average kid takes it 3 times. So if a person, the type of people who listen to podcasts like this, is pre-planning, type A mom, and takes the mock early, they're going to thank themselves they took the mock early. And here's why. I had a mom from Milton. And the kid said, please use me as an example in your parent info sessions you do. Don't be dumb like me. Now, this kid, his words, not mine. He goes, he's like, I play football. I should have done cross country. I'm 120 pounds. They don't let me play unless we're ahead by like 20. That's his words.
You still got to show up at every practice.
Exactly. Because of football, he sat there riding the pine, doing nothing, but he skipped the entire first semester of SAT dates. Then the March SAT date was governor's honors interviews that he was in. And then the May SAT date, he has 4 APs at Milton. And so he had right in the middle of APs. And then by June, he was already gone at Camp Thunderbird. And so he was screwed. And so if you're going to take it 3 times, that's why you take the mocks. Because what if you're the best swimmer at Dunwoody High School? Is the February ACT every year, past 20 years, always the same day as the state swim meet? Always. So if you plan early, you'll be excited realizing I only have one slate of 2 or 3 dates. So then it's magic how that works out. So that's also important.
Yeah. And I mean, you need to know the answers. Like I'm listening to all this and thinking back on all of the mistakes that I made. I didn't take the ACT. And I could have been much better at the SAT. I mean, ACT than SAT. And so, I was looking back, I guess.
Teenagers do not like to admit they're wrong. So many teenagers admit to their mom Thank you. I'm sorry. And like, that's the first time I've heard those words in a long time.
Yeah.
Like we have a kid from Riverwood. He lives he lives on my cul-de-sac, and he literally was fighting his mom. Mom, I'm a sophomore. This is so early. This is so stupid. All the other kids in the robotics team are doing the SAT. He was just going to choose the SAT blindly.
Yeah.
He had a PSAT of 1190. He got a cold 30 on the ACT. If he worked his tail off, he probably wouldn't even get to break even. So let's get greedy. And so he did spend 3 hours, and boy, is he thankful he did, because he just saved himself so much time and mom so much money. So, and it's true. Like, I'll use my family as an example. I was equal in the two tests. And if you knew my two sisters, this would make sense. My older sister, the journalist who reads David Foster Wallace for fun as a beach read, not surprisingly, did she get a better score on the SAT? She needs longer to think, but she loves deep, abstract, fancy reading, big vocab. My younger sister is the opposite. She's speedier, not a huge vocab reading person. Because the two differences, we always get that question. All of the ingredients, we say it's like Taco Bell. So at Taco Bell, all the items have the same ingredients, just different styles and proportions. And so both tests, SAT, ACT, have reading and grammar and math, but how they're different is the rigor versus the speed. The ACT is speedier. They give you less time per question, but it's fundamentally more straightforward. Whereas the SAT is fancier, more vocab. They have poetry analysis, etc., but they give you an absurd amount of time. So if your kid is fast enough that they can almost finish the ACT without practice, they're probably going to be an ACT kid, because it's just, there's not the fancy vocab. Like, kids don't know dystopian and indefatigable and some of this poetry analysis. My mom's a high school English teacher, so I know those words, but that's because that's cheating. My mom's a high school English teacher. But rather than rely on stereotypes, because you might hear this and think my kid is the literary journal club president, still have them take the mock, because you never know. And so just letting the mocks, and the mocks are real, full-length tests, and they're free. We offer them every weekend. And the other thing is, if there's a parent who's interested, this piques their interest, and they feel very underwater and behind, like we spoke at the Methodist Church, the YMSL Dunwoody chapter. Like we do parent meetings on Zoom, like the free college counseling, essentially the politically incorrect version of the sophomore parent night you wish they would do in the auditorium at school. So I can share that link with you for the show notes. We try to get people and empower them early. Ignite, so much what we do. We give away for free mocks and free info sessions.
That's what I was just thinking. Like, what do you actually sell?
So we do tutoring. So like I said, most people start with the class and then do one-on-one. But if logistically, if someone has a crazy ballerina schedule, pure private is totally fine as well, or if they just prefer it. But yeah, we try to just be a good community partner and do, I was talking with, I'm going to be talking with administration at Dunwoody to see if we can do a mock test on campus. Like we did that back pre-COVID, et cetera. Now, one thing, since most of your listeners probably are in Dunwoody, I want to give a shout out. I love Shark Tank. I love entrepreneurship. You're an entrepreneur. You run a restaurant. I love capitalism, America. Like, I'm grateful for, this country is a great country. But one thing that is not done enough in school, that Dunwoody has a great thing. We just eavesdropping on our students. Always before class starts in group class, we'll hear people from Dunwoody talking about the Finance Academy, Mr. Fortenberry. I know you've had him on the podcast before. The most practical classes you're ever going to take in life are in those type of things. My daughters, they're 6 years old. We have twins. They don't know it yet. You're taking AP Econ and you're taking AP Stat. Like, there's certain classes that are so practical that are amazing. So if parents of 8th graders are listening to this, make a mental note. Like, it's so practical. I look at what I use from high school in my life right now. It is things that are directly what they do right there. Because most schools, I mean, maybe I can work and see if we can get Riverwood to institute something clone similar over there. But it's so practical, but you see the kids. The kids are so passionate about, like, it's so practical. Like, who cares about memorizing battle dates, or did Van Gogh paint this one painting for art history class? Like, you can Google that. But like, the practical knowledge you get, you see it on kids' faces when they're like, "Oh my gosh, you hear what we're doing in Fortenberry?" Like, it's so cool. So if so, I'm not anti art history, but if a kid is like, "I have one slot left in my block schedule at Dunwoody," I don't know how art history ever wins over the finance. But just throwing that out there.
I have not heard a bad thing about the Finance Academy at Dunwoody High School. And Steve, so I took over the parade, helping with the parade with Penny a few years ago, and I could not wait to get Tom Bass and Fortenberry as our grand marshals, and they were last year, 2 years ago. Just because I just think that class and that little schedule that he puts together is just amazing, and every parent thinks the exact same thing. But so, do you think these days, I know that your business is built on college. Like, is college as important as you thought it was, when we were young? The entrepreneurial journey that all these kids think is cool now, it didn't used to be cool then. And I feel like maybe college, isn't for everybody. There's definitely a trade child that should be in trade, and
for sure. I mean, I think it's underrated in terms of college is not for everybody. I will say that many people who become entrepreneurial end up going back later and getting their degree. One guy who is not the college going type in my high school, he was the guy who could take apart your carburetor in your car, fix it, and put it back together. He was just like that guy. And so he started dating a girl whose dad happened to be the guy who builds those amazing backyards with the waterfalls and the hardscaping, the really expensive like mansion backyards. Right. And so his dad said, find a job this summer or I'll find one for you, because I'm not going to watch you play Xbox all summer. And so he ended up working for his girlfriend's dad. His Spanish grades went up because he was the only, person who was not fluent in Spanish the whole summer. But he learned that trade. And I mean, they're married now, and they run, and he's helping. Eventually, they're going to take over when Grandpa retired, whatever. But like, they're making, I have no clue what they make, but I'm very happy for him. He's doing very well. But eventually, as their company scaled, and they didn't just have their branch in St. Louis, but they wanted to expand to Kansas City. Like, he ended up going back to UMSL, University of Missouri St. Louis, taking some accounting classes, some HR classes. Like, he eventually went back to night school and got his degree. So even the people who take non-traditional paths, some of the information that you'll need in some of these entrepreneurial routes is still very, very, very valuable. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I love how some of our students.
That's what I was going to say. There's so many other ways to learn now too.
Yeah, so I love it when I hear students who are like, "Oh yeah, when I'm working out for my XYZ sport at high school, I have this like list of podcasts I'm subscribing to, and they're just learning through osmosis tons of really cool things." I mean, I don't think in the last 5 years, speaking of entrepreneurial students, every year I like to patronize the people who do the start your own business at Dunwoody. So I think we've had a different power washing company who, when they started through the Finance Academy.
It's an easy fallback.
But it's, hey, our driveway looks nice, and happy to indulge hardworking kids and entrepreneurship. But it's a great. But I think college in general is still very valuable. I think that if you can make it even more valuable, if you plan ahead. I can't tell you how often a kid says, "I want to go to school X and I want to major in this," and I'm not even a college counselor, and I'm like, "You do realize that school doesn't have nursing." Oh, really? Like, kids need to do, I mean, you're the one paying, your parents are paying for it, but you are student loans, but you need to do the upfront research and say what schools are really great. Like South Carolina, like, they are amazing. Like, one of the top 10 in the nation for international business. So if someone wants international business, that should be on their list. Mizzou is not the hardest to get into. Do they have one of the top 10 schools for journalism in the whole world? Like, Stone Phillips and so many of the people you'd recognize on the news and all the famous journalists went there. So spending some time researching what schools to apply to can make college way more worth it, rather than just randomly choosing schools based on where your friend last year went. So that's my one request.
That's how I chose.
I wish students would spend a little more time up front diving deep into Google and College Prowler and Niche and all these different sites that help analyze what schools are good for what majors.
But it's a tougher sell for you to tell them to do that. But you to tell the parents that are listening to this podcast, none of the high school students are listening to this podcast, but the parents, like, this is your chance, guys. Like, reach out to Brian, find a way to educate your children and tell them what is to be expected, because all the answers are out there. There's podcasts, there's, all of these different organizations that you've mentioned and websites that you've mentioned, and there's easy ways to find all of these answers. And if you can't find it, call Brian.
Happy to help.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It was nice catching up with you. And we went a little long today, but like I said, I wanted to know all of these answers so that I can help my children.
Happy to help.
Yeah. Thanks, man.